as far as panelists are concerned. So we're gonna start. How are you, everyone? Too busy to answer, right? So it's a hectic week, and thanks for coming here despite your very, insanely busy schedule. And looking forward to this panel. So my first JPM was in 2012, so not too long ago, but still almost 6+ years ago. And when I first came to JPM and walking around these streets, and there were some Asian investors, some Asian pharma executives, and it was hardly the case where there was expectation from Western, US-based or like even European-based companies to raise money from Asian investors back then. Okay, so that wasn't too long ago, and fast forward and today, obviously, I can't recall the exact number, but last year, out of some 10 billion plus venture money going into pure life sciences, a lot of that came from Asia. So I have some ideas to like how many percent, but it's a significant portion. So this panel sort of revolves around that as a context, sort of background, and we have some specific questions and areas to cover. And I guess twofold. One is sort of high level, like what has changed, what's going on, what will happen, so that the West East dynamics of investment and even business development, all those things, how it's going to unfold, and all those. And then obviously individually, individual panel member on top of those comments will talk about what they are looking for, their specific angles and strategy and differentiation. So we'll start with a quick introduction, and I'll introduce myself so that I get myself out of the way. So Novatio Ventures is an early stage investment vehicle. I'm based in Boston, and we have a presence in two places in North America, Canada, Toronto and Boston. And we also have a active fund in South Korea, where we invest in a bunch of companies there. So that's sort of where we are coming from. And I'll ask each of panel member to introduce herself and himself, and we start with Frank, who's very far to the left.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Frank Guo. I'm a managing director from EFON Capital. So EFON is a life science focused venture capital firm. We're based in Shenzhen, China. We're in the planning to have an office here in San Francisco. So currently we have about 2 billion RMB under management, which is roughly equals to $300 million. So typical investment stage, we look at Series A, Series B stage. Currently we have about 20 portfolio companies under management. 70% of them are pharma, and 30% of them are medical technology and medical device.
Hi everyone, my name is Jin, and today I'm representing TM Ventures. So we're a technology-focused venture firm based in Los Altos, California, and we primarily invest in early-stage startup companies in both tech and biotech industry, primarily in seed round and the Series A round. And we invest in diagnostics, therapeutics, and also medical device.
Hi, Vickers is a global early-stage venture capital company. Our biggest offices are actually in Singapore and Shanghai. I'm here to start the Silicon Valley office. We have partners with very diverse backgrounds. We have 2.5 billion under management, including co-investments, partners with backgrounds from finance to government, medical doctors, scientists. And increasingly our investment focus is in deep tech, and we've made quite a few investments in the life sciences biotech space. Myself, I'm a trained PhD scientist and spent many years in academia. So I've seen both sides of the table. As a very technical guy, I can appreciate the deep technical aspects of life sciences companies, but also have a very strong view on the commercial side of things. So.
My name is Wei Yongsan. I'm a Senior Director, Business Development, Daiichi Sankyo. Daiichi Sankyo is one of the largest Japanese company, and actually in Japan we have #1 market share regarding prescription drugs. And Daiichi Sankyo focus on 4 therapeutic areas: oncology and cardiorenal, rare disease, immunology, and those are the areas we actually looking for investment opportunities. We do not have a corporate venture firm. Instead, we took a limited partner in two San Francisco-based venture capital firms. And as a BD team, I also actually looking for early stage research collaboration in the therapeutic area that I mentioned.
Okay, great, thank you. So we have a representation from private VCs as well as corporate, even though it's not CVC, and country of relevance, so to speak, is China and Japan and Singapore. Okay, but you have an office in Shanghai as well. Okay, all right. So let's hear the sort of the diversity in their take in both macro and sort of the deal of preference that they would pursue. So first, as I mentioned, we're going to start out with somewhat more sort of macro, high level environment. What's driving this strong trend of Asian investors or investors who had some relation to Asia really coming very strong to Western market, and how their influence has changed and what's driving it, and importantly, how it's going to possibly change over the next 1, 2, 3 years, even though everyone knows that it's impossible to predict the future, but we'll still talk about it. So my first question is to that. So what's the sort of growth driver? And I mentioned my first 2012 JPM where there were hardly any Asian investors really, but ever since things have changed so dramatically. So what has changed over those time where you run into investor and like 1 out of 3 or 4 investors are from Asia and they have so much money to invest. So any take on what has changed and where things are going and on that respect? Anybody?
Yeah, maybe I'll take a shot at it. And I'll just say that, yes, there's been a lot of interest over the years in investing in private companies, but there's just been what we've seen, both from a fundraising side as well as an investment side, is an increasing level of sophistication in the investors that are coming to the table, right? And I think it's reflected in the profile of the panel that you have here today. Everyone is clearly very experienced technically and brings that sort of understanding of the industry. And investors invest in things they understand, right? And so with this, it's a chicken and egg problem. With this increasing appetite for more sophisticated investments and increasing entrance of people who have that ability to assess and source for deals in this area, I think you're going to see more and more investment in this area. And in many ways, as with the biggest perspective on this is that in many ways, biotech life sciences companies fulfill many of the key criteria of what makes a perfect or ideal venture investment, right? We want to invest in companies that have breakthrough technologies, right? That is an order of magnitude better than anything that's currently available, that is patent protected, right? That is addressing a critical unmet need in a growing market. And even better, for us at least in Vickers, if that's a platform technology that gives us many shots on goals, and maybe we'll talk about this in this panel, but now you're seeing a lot of companies staying private, right? Raising a lot of money with a very, very broad and thick pipeline. I think previously, the word platform was something that a lot of investors and pharma companies would stay away from, but increasingly you're seeing a lot of these companies staying private, raising a lot of money to advance many of these candidates in their platform through private arrangements. And so you see that well-capitalized investors are willing to take that risk, have that long-term perspective, especially from Asia, especially if they address many of the diseases that have a high prevalence in Asian markets, but maybe understudied or underaddressed in the European and American markets. Those would be of particular interest to investors like us coming from having that sort of Asian connection. But I want to clarify as well that we are global investors. We have that US presence. We have been in the US for a long time as well. And the reason for us actually coming to the US is that we're both strategic as well as opportunistic. We want to be where the global centers of innovation are. And I mean, to be completely honest with you, I mean, the US is still by far one of the strongest centers of innovation, especially in the life sciences space. So we'd be foolish not to be coming here and sourcing for these great companies, great technologies, entrepreneurs with that sort of experience and background to realize the real potential, therapeutic as well as commercial, of these candidates that they're advancing, and so that's why we're here.
So since I'm from China, so I can speak of the Chinese market. So since 2015, the Chinese government have established a new 2025 plan. So one of the very important goal of this plan is to establish the healthcare sector as one of the leading sector among the globe. So this have driven a lot of talent and also a lot of resource flow back to China. However, China is still lacking on the technical side. Even though it has been growing, a lot of efforts has been put into it, but it's still lag behind, especially compared to US and Europe. So this has driven a lot of Chinese investors and also Chinese pharma companies to come to the US and look for the leading technologies and potentially bring them back to China to support this trend. So particularly for our fund, so we're not a Chinese fund, so we're actually a US fund. But we do have a lot of connection with China. So if if a startup company has a specific China angle, that definitely interests us a lot.
So there's implicit expectation, so to speak, where you would invest in US companies and you would be able to help out actively with their expansion into it.
Yes, that's right, because we do have a lot of connection with China, so we can help them to get into the China market and also help them with regulation, clinical trial, all those things. Because although there are a lot of opportunities in China right now, but it's still pretty messy. A lot of time people don't know which clinical site is credible, where they should go. So we can definitely help them to navigate that.
Okay. What about Frank? Do you have expectation? I think you said R&D fund that you're running, right? So is there expectation that investment would have now direct relevance to something that they will come to China? Is that your investment strategy?
Yeah, sure. So for us, guess it's not working. So for us,
you share mine, please.
Yeah, sure.
So for us, we have an RMB fund. We also have a US dollar fund. So we are able to invest both of the Chinese companies as well as the US companies. And I do agree with the previous two panelists. There's definitely a need and increasing demand starting from 2015, which I can recall. Not only because of the 2025 program, but also there's a huge gap between the Chinese pharma and also the US pharma. I remember there was data showing that in 2014 or 2013, the market cap of Pfizer plus Johnson & Johnson will equals to all the market cap of all the Chinese pharma in the Chinese A-share. So definitely investors see the big gap, and the philosophy is if China can have their own like Tencent, Alibaba, and make it like very similar level or even better than the Western companies. So if there's such a big gap in the pharmaceutical area, which they can put the capital and help those company grow, and eventually there will be like Johnson & Johnson or Pfizer in China too. So that's the philosophy basically. I think starting from 2015, there are a lot of big capital get into the pharmaceutical area, and our rationale for having our dollar funds because there's an increasing of valuation in China, and actually a lot of Chinese pharma are a little bit overvalued. I know definitely a lot of people are definitely aware of that. So I think starting from 2017, we started our US dollar fund plan, and we raised our first dollar fund. We have invested all of them. One of the portfolio companies actually got IPO last year, and two of them are lined up for IPO hopefully this year. We have raised our second dollar fund. It's already ready this year. Ready for good investment opportunities.
Okay. So for you, Ayon, who is, by the way, he was a recurring panelist, so he's been here multiple times. But so I know you well. So you have less of sort of country angle to your investment strategy, even though your specialty medicine strategy may be relevant to what you see sort of countrywide in Japan, or is it really just inherent to your company, which is
First speaking of the Japanese pharmaceutical company, maybe a little different from China. Japan farmer started to sell their innovative drug maybe 30 years ago in the States. So we came to the States a little earlier than the Chinese companies, and so our investment in the strategy is very similar to other global big pharma, and we do not care where the innovation comes from. We care more about whether this is first in class and good science. So those are like the selection criteria. On the other hand, also maybe to compete with global mega pharma like Pfizer or GSK, it is difficult for even the biggest Japanese pharmaceutical company to get good deals, especially when the human POC is achieved. So therefore, we want to invest earlier in early stage startups in order to get the global right. On the other hand, we also open to other territory deal and on the late stage clinical compounds.
Okay. So as a group of investors here, so we have, some of you maybe have been on the other side where you were fundraising, but we have our own challenge, which is especially increasingly over the recent past and perhaps this year and next year as well. It's a competition for deal flow, right? So as an investor, you want to get in early in a company where it's relatively unknown, maybe even relatively inexpensive, and you get in and help them and you do well. So one way to deal with that obviously is a place like Boston where I'm coming from. There's a lot of build your own company investment model where you put together a large small seed round to do a proof of concept, and then you provide like 20, 30, 50 million Series A, and you carry it all the way until the significant value inflection point. As a group of Asian investors here, even though yes, invest in US companies, dollar fund and all that, what's your take on that strategy? Historically, even though the history is again very recent, Asian investors active over the last 3-4 years, I think Asian investors were seen as more of a sort of late stage focused investors, taking a little bit less risk, etc. But I think that's also changing. So what's your investment strategy, and what do you think about doing very early stage investment? Anybody?
Maybe I can start. I think different from other investor only put the money into a company, we also put our expertise. So we prefer the collaboration between the startup company and our scientists. So I can proudly say that we may not have the good discovery team to identify the novel targets. So that probably the academia and the startup company are doing a better job than us. But regarding the medicinal chemistry, regarding how to quickly generate antibody and humanize it, and even regarding like the PDPK, those like the capability we have. So I think by putting the strengths of both parties together, we can develop the drug quickly and move to the clinical stage, as early as possible.
So I would say, we definitely in the recent year we definitely begin to see a lot of Asian investors come to the U.S. So they start up their office here. So in attempt to find out the early stage promising companies, and especially they're recruiting local talent, who are deep in the field. So they would have a lot of connections. So this is a really good way for them to find early stage startup companies. So particularly for our fund, we've promoted primarily focus on the early stage, and also because all of our partners, they have worked in this space, and especially in the Bay Area for 20, 30 years. So they have a pretty wide connection with the local biotech industry and also with top universities, both in the US and also in China. So those are all good resources for us to find promising early stage startup companies. And also we consistently looking at different incubators, and also I think seminar is a really good way for us to spot any companies which is potentially outside our radar.
So for our strategy, we actually are also evolving. At the very beginning of we setting up the fund in 2017, because at that time we just want to test the water. We think the most conservative way and most practical way is to syndicate with the big guys. So we did like 2 syndicates with NEA, and turned out to be pretty successful. But for the second dollar fund, because now we're getting more familiar with what's going on here, and also we're more familiar with basically how the game plays. So we are able to be more aggressive, do more similar stuff like our strategy in China. Because in China, a lot of time we would like to not only be a financial investor, but also bring our resources to the company, help them build a team, help them to develop the network in the field, and also help them for the follow series of investment. So for example, this morning I saw a very interesting company developing a small molecule for anti-HIV, and we have a portfolio company in China. I definitely see a great synergy with that. So the plan for the follow-up conversation will be try to connect those two countries, those two companies, and try to see if there's any more collaboration or synergy there.
Yeah, so frankly, we are both strategic as well as opportunistic. So we're open to all sorts of different models. We're happy to syndicate with other investors and have done so. And that's certainly a very viable way to de-risk the candidate. Another way we manage risk is we are early stage investors, so there's plenty of risk there, especially if you're going for single drug candidates where there often is a binary outcome. And traditionally, that's the reason why a lot of investors have shied away from it, especially in Asia, I think. And so one way in which we mitigate that risk is to look for companies that have a deep pipeline. Where we look for companies where maybe they're addressing some sort of keynote in biology, right? There's an approach that addresses a particular target that is applicable to many different diseases. They have a pipeline of small molecule candidates that enables them to have many shots on goal, again, for different disease candidates. And so then our preference is to try and come in, spot these companies, come in as knowledgeable investors, and this means all the way from, first of all, having good interactions with the entrepreneurs, understanding deeply the technology, and I think our role as technically well-trained investors helps us with that a lot. So we know what people are talking about, we know the science, we know when to believe in the science, and then we can help them in so many different ways. We like to come in early and lead the round. We're happy to invest quite a bit to fulfill that, and we've done ticket sizes ranging from 500 to 30 million in a single investment. So there's really a big range in what we can do. And I think the biggest value we've had, because we like to invest in companies with strong teams, they know what they're doing in terms of development, and if not, there's plenty of resources nowadays on a contract basis. What we really bring to the table are all these proprietary networks that we have, access to very well-funded investors, institutions, and again, these are very diverse institutions. They could be strategic institutions that could strategically help the companies, or they could be a source of a lot of funding. And so, I think this is evident in our track record as well. For instance, one of our most successful portfolio companies, a company called Samumet, it's based in San Diego, has raised 650 million in equity financing so far, and I think almost all of it we helped to raise that money. So we don't only put our own money on the table, we bring our friends, our investors, we help them, we spend our own money and resources in helping them raise that extra money, and that's some real value that we're bringing to the table. In addition to that, of course, our connections with regulatory agencies, we have made several investments in, say, the pharma space now, and so we are familiar with the process. We do have connections. We have seen problems. We know how to advise the companies when they encounter this. And also, of course, like the other panelists have mentioned, we have many proprietary networks, not just in China, but also in Southeast Asia. And increasingly, I think a lot of companies should be and are interested in the Southeast Asian markets as well. Really a growing region of much importance in terms of population size as well as economies. And of course, the healthcare need there is enormous as well, and many needs are unique to that region, and we can certainly help them navigate all these different systems in the region.
So, so the shift in change is that unlike, again, I keep going back to like a few years ago when things were very different, especially with what pertains to Asian investors. But if you hear what panelists are speaking here, if one for saying, Asia Biotech, and if you just had heard, hear what they're saying, sounds very much like Western VCs, right? So there's less and less difference between what Asian investors used to do and expectation and their strategy. Even again, like 3-4 years ago compared to today, it has been sort of like equalized, right? So Asian names and Asian, money to some of them, but acting and investing very much like Western VCs. So that's one take. So to talk about a little bit more sort of specific differences. So everyone mentioned a little bit about your investment strategy, but so this is really for the benefits of audience. What are you looking for? Like what indications, what sort of platform technology, like modality, etc. Can you be more specific on what you're looking for?
Sure. I think our company has a clear strategy, and in the past we focused more on the small molecule, and because in Japan, we are very proud of medicinal chemistry, and we have. But I think that the industry is changing from the best in class to first in class. Just as one example, when we launched our first ARB for hypertension, it's the 7th to the market, but still, the peak sales was like $2 to $3 billion worldwide. I don't think you can repeat those kind of story right now. And basically, you have to be the first in class, first follow, and you have to shift from small molecule to some very difficult target using antibody or even like gene therapy or cell therapy. So also that is affect our investment strategy. And now we focus more on investing in early stage technology platform, and instead of just a lead molecule. And also regarding the new modality, both gene therapy and cell therapy are our focus. And we made 2 cell therapy deals. One, we licensed in the KITE and CAR-T for the Japanese right, and we also licensed in the heart cell from a UK based cell therapy company, which also at the phase 2 stage where we made the deal for the Japanese right. So if you really have a new technology, new platform, we want to take a look. The reason for that is also for small molecule, if you fail, you failed. But for the technology platform, even you failed one indication or one application, you can still use that for some other indication or other applications.
So I think we do share some similarities with Daiichi Sankyo. We are, like I mentioned earlier as well, also looking for platforms and that's the way as an early stage investor we mitigate risk. But maybe I'll take one step back and just talk about some macro themes that we're interested in, right? I think regardless of being in the Western Hemisphere or the Eastern Hemisphere, if you divide it that way, we're interested in an aging population. in general. I mean, there are many countries that are experiencing this problem. The more mature countries in Asia are seeing a very significant aging population problem as well. And with that comes all sorts of, I think, therapeutic opportunities, right? Both in terms of degenerative conditions. So we're interested in things that address degeneration, right? This could be things like Alzheimer's, for instance, or arthritis, hair loss, and also chronic conditions like cancer, right? Increasingly is something like that, and even obesity, diabetes, right? So some of the companies in our portfolio address these issues. Cybermed, for instance, has drugs that have the regenerative potential, and there are others in our pipeline that address the more chronic conditions like obesity and cancer as well. Another theme that we're very interested in, again, infectious diseases, right? Big pharma retreating very much from vaccine development and underinvesting in that area, we feel. But again, this is an area of acute need, particularly in many of the non-Western, non-European countries, where infectious disease is still probably one of the, if not the major cause of mortality in many of these countries. So we're interested in companies that have a unique and proprietary approach as a platform that could potentially address many infectious disease modalities problems. Another thing that we're interested in is sort of the convergence between many different types of technology as well as pharma opportunities. So even in the drug development and delivery process itself, right? How do we accelerate the process, reduce costs, increase efficacy? And so some of the investments that we've made in, say, AI drug discovery space speak to that, and other investments in the drug delivery space would address that as well. But again, those are the things that have address this sort of macro trend and have the platform potential, and are things that we're looking actively at. There's other things that we're interested in. We've been looking at diagnostics for a long time, but looking for that urgent need, that critically unmet need that requires point-of-care diagnostics, for instance, and are looking very, very hard for a technology that addresses that. And of course, that sort of personalized genomic monitoring technologies that, it's not just recreational, but where there is an actual use case, there is an actionable insight that we can derive. It's something that we're very interested in and looking at for quite a while.
So since we are primarily focused on early stage startups, so we are really technology driven. Because we invest in the wide range of field, diagnostics, therapeutics, and medical device, so it really doesn't matter which field it is. So as long as you have a very disruptive technology, which is potentially cross-disciplinary and also have a potential big impact in the Chinese market, we will be interested in that. So other than technology, we also really focus on the market as well, because we are investors. In the end of the day, we are looking for return. So if you target at a very big market, with decent competition, this justifies the risk there. This means that we could potentially have a good return in the end. So third thing we focus on is really the team, because no matter how good the technology is, if you don't have a good team to carry it out, it's likely to fail in the end. But on the team side, we can definitely help out, if you're missing in certain areas, so we can leverage our network to help you to find the right hair to balance out the team.
I think the previous panelists pretty much cover all the area. So particularly, I think personally, also for the team, we're open to all kinds of areas, but specifically, we're interested in cell therapy, especially after CAR T. We think there are several, problems still existing for CAR T therapy, especially for the cost. I think, UCAR T could be, the next trend, and also we're interested in some specific area like TCR-T. We think that would be because CAR T is not very good at targeting those solid tumors. Actually, last year, in November, we just closed a deal with an American company. They're doing very good science and received about over 20 million from the NIH for the funding. We just helped them close the Series A for that. So besides cell therapy, we're also interested in the aging area. One of our portfolio companies in China, Centage Pharma, they just I think announced a collaboration partnership deal with Unity. So we are also reviewing potential companies in different conferences. So besides those, I would like to actually share some of my personal thoughts about the differences between the Chinese market as well as the U.S. Market. So there are certainly several differences because in China, a lot of like big blockbuster drugs are probably not going to be selling well in China. For example, everybody knows Humira is the top selling drug in all over the world. But the sales in China, I think, is only like 20 or 30 million something. So I think there are certainly several differences in the Chinese market and in the U.S. market because in China there's a huge and a strong needs for the herbal medicine. Basically, a lot of diseases people tend to use the herbal medicine instead of the expensive injection for these big molecule drugs. Another example could be NASH because NASH is a big market potentially here in the States and all over the world. But in China, usually at that stage of the disease, and also there are a lot of herbal medicine could be, the patient could go to those medicines instead of going to pay a lot of money for the new drugs. So these are the areas that we're interested in the differences. But eventually, I think it all comes to four, factors. I think first, the company has to have very solid science, and second, has to have a very strong team. Also, the drug need to really target an unmet medical need, and the fourth factor will be it should be fair in valuation.
So, Shin, you mentioned a little bit about AI, but to everyone. So what's your take or investment strategy for AI, if any? Because I'm asking partly because there seems to be so many AI companies out there, especially relative to the number of investors who are actually seriously interested about investing in early stage AI in particular. And like business model for AI is can be ambiguous, right? Is it service or is it do you want to be do you want to do your own discovery and ultimately come up with some drug? I think we are at the crossroad. Maybe it's a very large crossroad. Maybe it will take some time to cross. But biotech, early stage in particular, investing into AI. I think that's interesting. Okay, possibly you may have some comments. And just as a disclosure, or just so you know, so I'm a board member of an Israeli AI company, and we just announced on Monday large partnership with one of the big pharma companies. So we are kind of in a little better shape than a lot of AI companies that are out there. So it's like, what's your take or your investment strategy or any interest in AI?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Again, I think AI has a lot of potential to address one of those themes that I talked about in terms of improving the speed to even hit discovery, lead optimization, improving the efficiency as well as reducing the cost of that process. We invested in a company that's actually based in San Francisco, and their name is Atomwise. The lead investors of that round was Monsanto Growth Ventures, B Capital, a lot of other Silicon Valley investors invested as well. It's a $51 million round. Khosla, Draper, a bunch of other VCs. Actually, Tencent and Baidu both invested in Atomwise as well. And the reason why we like Atomwise, for instance, is that we had also been looking at AI drug discovery companies for quite a while, and there are literally more than 100, maybe hundreds, who claim to have some sort of connection or use AI in some way to accelerate drug discovery. And I think they fall in the spectrum of, if you think about it in sort of two axes, right? Either they're service providers, or they're building their own pipeline, and they could be, sort of small molecule focus or peptide focus, for instance. It's just simplistically speaking, right? And so we were drawn to Atomwise because they were taking this approach that, again, spoke to our strategy of how we mitigate risk, by spreading our bets across multiple different areas, right? They were acting more as service providers. They had already had many partnerships with companies such as AbbVie and other companies that I'm unable to name, Big Pharma, and had a lot of success. And in fact, Monsanto, collaborated with them to figure out a new small molecule for antifungal applications, and had a lot of success. And so we're very inspired actually to lead the round as a result. So not only were they a customer, they also became an investor, and a strategic one at that. And so I think that provided a lot of technical validation. I think in terms of the AI drug discovery space, there is quite a bit of these first mover dynamics at work. I think a lot of algorithms, the algorithmic approaches are not necessarily unique. Many of them are publicly available, and the field, very interesting and very nicely actually in many ways for humanity, is very open and sharing about these advances. And so you do see a lot of the progress and improvements in algorithms that are publicly available. So I think a lot of the approaches are not necessarily proprietary. The advantages that these companies have may not necessarily be proprietary. So it then becomes who can get the most data first, and who can get their predictions validated in experimental contexts. And in many ways, we're looking for that, and Atomwise had a lot of that. They have a unique business model where they basically raise a lot of money in order to fund a lot of these academic collaborations, where basically they would do in silico predictions for free, right? And so then it becomes a no-brainer for many of these academic or even small biotech industry collaborators to come and say, look, we have this a very interesting target for which the crystal structure is known. Tell us what you can do with this, and Atomwise, after some curation, will take on that project. They will then run their simulations and then provide a panel of 100 molecules to the company or the collaborator for free. And so if there is a hit that emerges from that, then we can talk about what's subsequent licensing arrangements and sort of thing. But so as a result, they then have an option to participate in the potential upside of all these hits that they find. And actually, this is also a data gathering exercise for them, because every negative result, as well as the positive result, helps to train their algorithms. So we thought that this was a very smart approach. The other thing that we really liked about the company was that they were not just, a lot of the AI companies are in, I would say, target identification, and that's very, very important. But there are a lot of targets out there right now, and the problem with many of those targets, many good targets, but they're very difficult to drug, right? So we like that the Atomwise in particular was playing the space of designing molecules for those difficult to drug targets. And not only that, they were also playing the lead optimization space, which is really designing that candidate that would become that commercial application of their discovery. So not just in a hit, but in a much later stage drug that was going to go into clinic. And so we felt had the most commercial potential. So it's really the confluence of all these things. They had the data, they had a very, very strong team. Of course, the science is excellent. They were able to play in many, many different markets. And they were able to gather the data as well as have that sort of experimental validation all integrated into the pipeline. So in terms of AI companies, I think looking for that complete package was something that was a reason why we invested.
Okay, here we go. AI 101, more than 101. Okay, so we have 5 minutes, so we have to open up the floor for any Q&A from the audience. Anyone? Yes, please.
Many U.S. companies may not have filed patents over in Asia. Does that impact your decisions out here then?
I think most U.S. company will file patent in Japan. So for us, that's not the problem. And if we want to do something with U.S. biotech company, even just developing drug in Japan, we have to license in the patent.
Yeah, so maybe very early stage companies in the US, who is obviously resource constrained, maybe prioritization as to which patent IP to file in terms of geography. But I think it's increasingly obviously true that IP filing in Asia comes as an important priority for a lot of companies, but not all. Okay, can we have any other questions from?
Do you guys file in China? Do you file in China? Any of your companies file in China?
file IP in
File your
China?
patents in China.
Yeah, we definitely see a lot of startup companies know they not only file patent in the US, also in China. And actually China could be their second target because the Chinese market is huge. You can't lose the opportunity
Do they have a
there.
mechanism to protect that?
You mean, do they have patent protect in China? Yes, definitely. I think the China patent protection is definitely increasing in those years. Although I think a lot of Americans still think the patent protection in China is not that good, but actually the Chinese CFDA is definitely improving, and they're actually learning from the FDA. So a lot of aspect is very similar there.
We were sort of running out of topics to discuss for Asia-specific panel. Maybe patent, we might focus on that next time. And then anyone else has any other questions, any comments, anything? Yes, sir.
Following I'm in Boston, following the Asian investors, what they've been looking at, and it's just so amazing to hear what you're looking at. And I think the more that you can focus on the gene therapies and AIs in the world, yes, you have to be relevant to your population patient. That truly will give you a leapfrog opportunity. So from a very self-serving perspective, and an incubator that gives birth to lots of AI and gene therapy companies, we love it.
So maybe adding to that comment, for example, regarding gene therapy, currently we are, targeting on the monogenic disease, right? Those like monogenic disease, they are rare disease. Maybe in Asia, the patient population is totally different from the patient population in the US. So that is why, by targeting the monogenic rare disease, we can really, focus more on the patient of our countries. For example, a recent deal I made last year was using the AAV vectors to targeting liver specific disease and with a lot of patient population in Japan.
All right, so we are out of time. Thank you everyone for coming.